Welcome to Make Your Money Matter, the show that aims to change the way we think about financial advice so you can make better financial decisions. Brad Barrett is a managing director and partner at One Capital Management, a wealth management firm serving nearly 1,500 clients nationwide with over $2.5 billion in assets. They are a group of advisors dedicated to ensuring their clients achieve their investment and retirement goals. And now, here's your host, Brad Barrett.
Welcome to Make Your Money Matter, the show dedicated to helping you create a better relationship with your money. I'm your host, Brad Barrett, and it's my goal to help distill the best ideas when it comes to your finances so that you can make more confident money moves. Here at One Capital Management, our mission is simple: to help our clients and you listeners take control of your finances and build the life you deserve. Friends, as I say each week, today the challenge is no longer the access to information, but rather it's finding the right information. And more importantly, how all of that information applies to you. And that's my commitment to you here each and every week, because after all, your money matters. And before we get started on this week's episode, to find out more about me or our advisory team here at One Capital Management, you can go to our website at onecapitalmanagement.com or give us a call. You can call us at 805-409-8150. So in this week's episode, I want to talk about something that is very intricate, but at the same time, very simple. And it's the notion or the biggest question that most people have when they call us from the podcast or from our radio programs or from our referrals from our clients, which we're so blessed to have. And that question is a very simple one. How do I know how to know when I can retire? Now, we've talked about this subject at length on this show, and I've talked about it constantly within our firm, within our clients, but I want to break it down to a high level, like simple aspects to look for. We all know that those listening right now, we've scrimped and we've saved, and we know where we're at somewhat. And if you don't know, that's when you want to sit with an advisor to make sure you go through your planning. But the question is always back there, right? Am I really ready to retire? What does it look like? Am I leaving money on the table by retiring now versus next year? So I want to go through some simple calculations that we here at One Capital Management go through when we design a wealth forecast for our clients. Now, we obviously go much more in depth, and I think everyone listening should find an advisor to go more in depth on, but I at least want to kickstart it with a few calculations and ideas around the date in which you're looking at retiring. And for some listening right now, you're like, Brad, I got it all handled. I know I'm going to retire at 60 or 65 or maybe even 55. I know how I'm going to structure it all. And it brought up something that happened actually a couple weeks ago. My daughter and I were on a daddy and daughter date, and we were walking into a restaurant, and the hostess stand had like a really low bar hanging off from it where they put the menus on. And my daughter was kind of running in. She's about 4.5. She's running in, and I kind of yelled to her, "Hey, Kate, duck," because she was heading right towards this bar, this low-hanging bar that is like perfect head length for her, where she was going to run right into it, totally get flat backed. I'm like, "Kate, duck." And no joke, she turns around to me and she goes, "Quack," and then proceeds to hit her head on this bar. Now, anyone who's listening right now who's a parent or a grandparent understands very clearly that two things are going on in your mind. One, you're concerned about your kid, and two, you're trying to hold back laughter because she literally, in the midst of her banging her head and flat backing herself on this hostess stand, she had the audacity to give a one-liner, give a quip. And I bring this up because a lot of times I'll meet with people, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but they're like, "No, I got it. Quack. I'm good. Don't worry about me. Don't tell me about what's ahead. Don't tell me about the bar I'm about to run into or the pothole I'm about to sink my wheel into." And it's kind of funny, right, when you think about it, because sometimes what we see in ourselves as a 4.5-year-old can actually be the same we'll see in different aspects when we're 55 or 60. And I just want to share on today's episode that these are ideas to start the inspiration around helping answer the question. Now, as you know, and as I've said multiple times, having counsel and that advisor with you to really walk you through the entirety of it is vital to the success of the overall retirement plan and also the investments that go into it. I share this all the time, the analogy of a car. I know it's overused, but I like it, and it makes a lot of sense to me. If you think about it, everyone talks about a stock or an investment. It's the engine, right? This fancy engine that runs and is so great and super efficient. And that's all great, but if it doesn't have a chassis and tires to run on, it's going to go nowhere. So investing and planning come hand in hand. Now, see if you can relate to this. You've contributed to your retirement plan over 20, 30, or 40 years. Maybe you've been paying extra on your mortgage, or maybe you've already had it paid off. Maybe you keep some cash on hand for those unexpected expenses, or maybe some upcoming big ticket purchases. And you always wish and often wish there was a way to pay less in taxes. Sound familiar? Well, that's pretty much everybody, right? Now, not in all those camps, definitely the last part around paying less in taxes, but you've worked for 30 or 40 years and are approaching retirement, pension, maybe Social Security, whatever it might be, and you're now looking at maximizing your benefit. Now, here's often what comes next and why I want to share this relatability. You look at the account statements and begin to wonder whether that's your deferred comp plan, your 401k statements, your IRAs, whatever it might be. You look at the account statements and begin to wonder whether these investments you are in are the right ones to own for where you are in life. I want to say that again. You're looking at your account statements at some point, whether in your 40s or 50s, and you kind of take a look at the account and you kind of go, are these the right investments for me that I bought and invested in when I was 20 or 30 to carry me in to retirement? And you begin weighing your options for making withdrawals from your retirement account, something I'll talk about and we talk about a lot on this show. And you aren't exactly sure how all this is done. And you're nervous about the risk, maybe of a stock market pullback, and maybe the possibility of running out of money. As I've shared before, in nearly 20 years of being a financial advisor, the most common denominator of all aspects of anyone who walks through our doors is the fear and anxiety around running out of money, or said differently, the sustainability of your retirement. And then guess what? It happens. You begin searching on the internet. Now, I know you're listening right now, and I know we do it. It's totally normal. We do it from everything from a medical condition all the way up to how Chris Rock responded to Will Smith's slap. All right? The internet is there. And that may even be how you ended up here, by the way, listening to this. And after a lot of searching and reading, you realize that there are just so many options to choose from. And you resort to simply eliminate options that you're not as familiar with or have heard maybe negative things about. Then you take what's left and you try to put together a coherent strategy while continuing a search to find information that supports what you have already contrived. Now, I bring this up because there's a lot of behavioral traits that go into it. Some of it's herd mentality, some of it's different aspects around your own perceptions of your world and making sure that what you're reading fits in to that perception. Neither good nor bad, just something I want to notice. And the other weekend, my kids and I, we were out playing on Saturday, and we came back when I had some quiet time. We're going to watch a show. And so I sat on the couch with them, and I actually pulled on Netflix on the kids version, and we're on there, and we were sitting there, and I think for the first time it dawned on me that there was literal paralysis by analysis. There were so many options. Me and my kids were like, what show? I mean, when I was growing up, it was like one of 3 shows, and you had it every half an hour. And also, you didn't have a cable box, so it was just that channel. As anyone listening probably relates to this, it was that channel. And if you missed it at 4 o'clock after school, that was it. Now we have this plethora of options. And I bring that example up when I was with my kids last weekend because it was the same thing that we go through when we're looking up an investment vehicle, or whether a Roth IRA is right for you, or what options you should have in your 401k, or how to look at retiring on the internet. The internet is great, but it can also provide us with a paralysis by analysis. And I'm not here to say that the DIYers listening, the do-it-yourselfers, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying you've got to really contextualize how you're looking at your situation and making sure you have objective advice going into it. Now, regardless of the details of how you might be looking at things on the internet, let's say, or talking with colleagues, what you do next is critical to your long-term success when it comes to planning. The decisions you make will determine the trajectory of your financial future. And it's, in my opinion, imperative to have a good plan to follow. So let's get into it here. What to do and how are you to know when you can retire? Now, there's a lot to this if done correctly. And at some point, you're probably going to want some professional help, as I mentioned. But there are a few things that I want to go through to get things moving in the right direction. And the first thing I want to bring up, one of 3 today, is calculating your income needs. So that is the bare bones of retirement planning 101. Now, we at One Capital Management, we take that a little step further, enhance that with inflation numbers and just a whole bunch of different things. But let's just start at the beginning. Before you jump in and begin picking, from the assorted list of investments that you found on the internet, you should actually understand that investing for a second is actually the very last step in the process. And I'll mention that here as item number 3. You would be well advised, in my opinion, to set aside all of those for now and begin with your income needs. You can't sidestep this, all right? Because you have to know this figure before you can do anything else. Now, to do this right, we have to sort through and total up your bank accounts, then your insurance payments, then your tax payments, then your monthly living expenses. And by the way, if you're listening, you're like, oh my gosh, Brad, that sounds like too much. And by the way, you might be right. So let me break it down for you. There's 2 things that matter when it comes to understanding your outflow, both now and in retirement. One is living expenses, and the other is lifestyle expenses. Now, living expenses is everything from your mortgage or rent payment to your insurances, like I mentioned, to food, all the stuff that you need to wake up and actually need as living expenses for the day, for the month, for the year. The other side of it is lifestyle expenses. Now, this portion of it is really simple in the sense that this is more your wants. So said differently, there's 2 4-letter words. Need is your living expenses. Want is your lifestyle expenses. So this is where you want to add your goals, your savings, your things like that. Now, a point to make here that when you're going through this is that some of the items you're going to calculate before you retire will be there when you retire, but some won't. So we have to kind of also dissect the 2. So number 2 in the retirement planning 101 category here is calculating your income gap. So once you have the figure on how much you have going out, you need to add up all the sources you will have coming in retirement. For many, that'll be a pension. Some that might be some Social Security. It might be some rental income or other fixed sources that will come in after active work. All right, so once you have that number, you subtract the expense number from that number, and that's how we identify the return, which now comes into investments. That's how you identify the return you will need from your investments. So the calculation that I just went through will tell you the yield you need from your investments, and this figure shouldn't be more than 4 to 5%. That is a sustainable average of distribution. Now, real quickly, for those working right now, you're in the accumulation phase. You're contributing to your retirement plan. Maybe you're paying down a mortgage, putting kid through school, whatever it might be. Ultimately, you're going to get into the distribution phase, and that will change quite a bit. So now we need to marry the rate of return with the withdrawal rate. And the 4 to 5% is a historical data around studies year over year around if you're taking 4 to 5%, the probability of your assets lasting your lifetime is high. So let me give you an example of what I just mentioned. And I've brought this up on the show before, so many of you listening have already heard this before, but it's so important that every couple months or so, I like bringing it back up and in different ways. So let's say you have $10,000 a month is your outflow. That's your living expenses and your lifestyle expenses in retirement. But your income, pensions, rental income, maybe some Social Security, whatever that might be, is $8,000 a month. So you have $8,000 coming in, $10,000 going out. So you have a $2,000 a month net need, right? $2,000 a month multiplied by 12 to get an annual number is $24,000 a year. Now, let's add some taxes in there for a second because the majority of our clients and the majority of retirees have their distributions coming from tax-deferred assets, 401ks, deferred compensation plans, 403bs, different structures when it comes to retirement. So we have to add some taxes. So let's round that number out to a total of $30,000 a year, $24,000 a year for the net need. And let's add another $6,000 for taxes taken out every month as withholdings. So $30,000 a year. And let's say, for example, between all of your retirement assets, you have $1 million saved up. $30,000 divided by $1 million is 3%. Now that may mean nothing, but after this discussion, you can see that it's below your 4 to 5% withdrawal rate. That is a very healthy and sustainable, based on historical data, a lot of averages, a lot of probability curves, Monte Carlo situations, that is a very stable and sustainable distribution rate. Now, why I bring up investments as the last part here is that also tells us as money managers and portfolio managers and financial advisors to our clients that, okay, the client needs to pull 3%, which means we need to earn at least 3%. So constructing a portfolio around your distribution rate in retirement is key. It's very different than when you started working in your 20s and 30s and you were designing your portfolio for growth, knowing that you had time on your side, knowing that you had contributions going in. Now it's different. We are now drawing from the account, number one. Number two, we are also not adding to it. I know those are polar opposites, but they actually are two separate categories. We are withdrawing and not adding. So building a portfolio that allows for both has to come into play here. Now, the last thing I'll bring up here is inflation. All right. I'm going to add this here to the point because inflation will be in our future. Now, as I've stated in the past couple of weeks, there's a large conversation going on both internally here in our investment committee, us advisors and economics who've been doing this for nearly 20 years and forecasting out. We're still looking at a sustainable 3 to 4% over 30-year inflation period, even with this large, 7% figure we're looking at right now. But we have to look at it as a long-term average. But even if we use historical figure of 3.5%, let me give you some math for a second here. If we use an historical 3.5% and project that out for your retirement, we can estimate that in 15 years, your income need will actually increase by 68%. So we have to consider the headwind in your calculations. This is where you take Retirement Planning 101. You sit with an advisor to build a custom-built plan because it becomes really dynamic than just static numbers of $10,000 a month and $8,000 a month as my hypothetical example. It becomes much more three-dimensional, much more dynamic. And so really to getting the idea of answering the question that you might be having either subconsciously or maybe having with your spouse or actually just out loud and you're actually wondering it, of how and when is the right time for you to retire. This is the basis of calculating your income need, understanding your income gap, and then how that income gap relates to your investments. That's the 1, 2, 3 punch process, if you will. And past that, that's where you go and seek counsel, find that advisor to help build your plan around answering the question for you of when you are to retire. And Ralph Waldo Emerson once said, "The mind once stretched by a new idea never returns to its original dimensions." I use that quote because I hope that I might have stretched the dimensions of your mind just a bit so you can kind of see the contextual advantage around knowing these 3 basic items around income, retirement, and then how your investments play in. And past that, seek advice, because ultimately the real measure of your wealth, other than the calculations, is how much you'd be worth if you lost all your money. So the protection of your money, the understanding of the money, what it means to you. I'm not saying you're going to lose all your money, by the way. I'm just saying that we have to think about this. We talk about money as a net worth statement, but the reality is there's a lot to you as a person, as a father or a mother, as a brother or a sister, as a child. There's so much in the world that we get wrapped up in the money aspects of things. The more you plan, the more you answer this question for yourself around the checklist of things you can go through, the more you're able to be free and actually live out your worth and purpose, in my opinion. And I think that's what's so advantageous. That doesn't show up on a quarterly report necessarily as a rate of return, but it's such a value added by a good, trusted advisor. And if you want to seek our help, please feel free. You can reach us at 805-409-8150, or you can go on our website at onecapitalmanagement.com. I want to thank you for listening to the Make Your Money Matter show. Remember, before acting on anything discussed today, speak with a financial advisor near you. And if you're not sure where to turn and you'd like our help, you can visit us at onecapitalmanagement.com or give us a call, 805-409-8150. And until next week, always remember to make your money matter.
The information in this podcast is educational and general in nature and does not take into consideration the listener's personal circumstances. Therefore, it is not intended to be a substitute for specific, individualized financial, legal, or tax advice. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a final decision.